everyone. I will attempt to talk through assignment 2. A lot of the first bit is self-explanatory there about the dates, etc. Certainly there are some questions coming up, and I want to go over some things, and hopefully this will clear things for a lot of the questions. If you've got more questions, let me know. We'll come back to that if we need it. Submission requirements, 3 PDF pages of plans and sections of different times, scales and audiences. Emma Wang asked me a few questions, and I thought they were very good questions, and so I will speak into those questions and the kind of conversations I had with Emma about them. But Emma asked me, for a start, do we need to do A1 or AO? I would say do what you think your project needs. You can make those decisions, A1 or AO. How do those pages begin to look? What am I meaning by timescales and audiences? What I'm suggesting is who you already know how we're working to multi-scale. So let's talk about this multi-audience. So Maritza at Council was very clear that students need to know how to filter information. We all need to know how to filter information. So you'd have a different kind of panel or a different board. Let's say you did 3 PDF pages, one for your neighbourhood, local communities, and maybe that's about something that's occurring in the next 6 months to 5 years. Maybe another one of your PDF pages is about high-level local government and state government, maybe federal government. Maybe that page has focus on what's happening in 150 years, or that longer-term thing, the sea level rise. The issue here is, and that's what I said to Emma, the issue here is this existential issue. And I talked about existential in week 1. So it's an idea that as humans, we won't exist. It's an existential problem. So this idea that we'll all get flooded away alarms people. And where this meets our reality is I'm very aware that with Newcastle Council in the 4th years last year, they wouldn't let us exhibit the 4th year's work because of the bad optics to the local constituent and real estate. So we do need to be very careful what the game is we play here in how we visualize things and who we show them to. So what I want you to get better at is filtering information to particular audiences. So choose some audiences and make different pages up. So a whole page, a PDF page, maybe about 150 years and big sort of sea level rise and the full coastal risk.com kind of mapping, and this is what's going to be flooded, because it will be flooded. That's what the science is telling us. We don't know exactly how long, we don't know exactly how deep. That's probably a good page to put things like compulsory acquisition plans, that sort of higher level information with a longer staging. And I'm going to talk back into this word of staging. Another PDF page might be, certainly talking to Emma, who's on Tunbridge Park. We talked to some of her communities, things like the RSL Club over the road, potentially the school, potentially local walkers, potentially the links to the stormwater node up near the trash rack along Ramsgate Road, plus potentially the stormwater line that goes out from Tunbridge out to the beach. I would say, and even the horse owner who's very near the trash rack site on Ramsgate Road, and we think there's a police station or a fire station. A local person mentioned that to me, but I couldn't see which one. But I would say all those people types are within that neighbourhood community, and they might all be presented on one page. What would you say to all of them? I mean, you do not want to say to all of them, a wave is going to surge all your homes out in 100 years. That's just too scary, frankly. And that's why Newcastle Council, that's what they're talking about, bad optics. So how do we give positive glass half full optics. So that's probably a shorter time frame. It's probably more about exposing things like the eel habitat, connecting people at the RSL club to the waterway catchment. How could you do that? Have some ideas about it. Maybe it's through social media. Maybe you have a burger at the RSL club linked to eels, which is a disgusting thought. You know, don't start people eating eels. But how do you create a local identity, which is exactly the same languaging that Asta was talking about yesterday with Septet? How do we amplify these local characteristics at everything? So that's the kind of local short-term information I would think you'd be putting towards one page. That might be about children's engagement from a local school or baseball club. What would you be doing if you're presenting to the baseball club? What would go on that page if you're presenting to dog walkers? Maybe it's about, you know, a location map of the other dog parks, fenced off areas. Maybe for pedestrians, it's about these are the current pedestrian links over the waterway. Here are some proposed for more. Like you'd have who is your audience and what does your PDF page, what's it going to sell to them? Cup half full, cup half full. That longer term, that bigger, higher thinking, state government, that's, I think, where the science comes out a bit more. Maybe the other page is something almost from your term one. Emma said, you know, she wanted to have an audience was children with disabilities. And I said, well, maybe that's a third page, like a very specific page about disability. Maybe it's children at the school, maybe it's disabled returned service, usually men, members at the local RSL club. Maybe it's about wheelchair access up Ramsgate Street. Maybe it's about safe crossings for wheelchairs across Ramsgate Street, across the waterway. Maybe it's about police awareness of dealing with disabilities. Maybe it's about playground awareness and disability. So maybe it's very specific to that. It's a very big general community, the idea of the disabled community. So that might be one page, your big, broad community, versus a very neighbourhood community on another page, versus a state government holder. Now, all of them would have a different way of talking about time too. And I'm planning to give you a deeper lecture on time later this week, and I will release that. But for now, in this conversation, you know, I'd be thinking sort of 6 months to 5 years might be one kind of way of thinking about time. That longer pull out, 150, 200 years might be another way of thinking about time. And maybe something in the middle is another way you think about time. There's a key word that I haven't said yet that I'll talk more about, but is contingency planning, where you draw a plan that's contingent on something else happening before it. So it relies on something else happening before it. So you may have like phasing or staging. Stage 1, stage 2 happens after stage 1 is completed. Stage 3 happens after stage 2 has been reached. Now, what happens in there? It may be, and I'm going to use Emma's site as an example. It may be Tunbridge Park is full of water after a 4-year drought. There was a rain bomb, and it's now full of water. So perhaps contingent on Tunbridge Park being full of water as a detention basin, contingent on it being full, these are the things that happen. This is how people engage with it. These are the parts that are still exposed. These are the ones that have gone under, etc. These are the plants that now will thrive. These are the birds that will now come, contingent on this other stuff happening, which would be a very different kind of plan and imaging to what if that hadn't happened. So if the rain hadn't come, if it hadn't flooded, if it remained in drought, what would be your moves then? So you've got two very different, and you know, everything's contingent on another. And what we do know in this unpredictable but very forecastable site, the entire corridor, is it's getting wetter. So we know in that long range, it's it's contingent on a 0.2 metre rise, on a 0.3 metre rise, on a 0.4 metre rise, etc., etc. And a surging high tide and a higher low tide. A surging king tide twice a year and a monthly surging higher tide. They will be incremental. What I'd also say, and I will talk with some slides later in the week, is to be choosing a time measure. Again, dependent on what community you're talking to. So if you were Ron Zen, who I think has a lot of focus on the school, sorry, just be using you as an example, Ron Zen, you come to mind, it would make sense to me to be using the period of time children are at school as your time measure. Now, I'm not sure about that school. I don't know if it's a high school. So maybe it's 2 years of kindy and 6 years of primary school. I might be wrong. So that's about 8 years. So maybe you break up your thinking into 8-year chunks. So your measure is this sort of period of time at that. I'm going to swap screens because something, just stay with me. Something came up with Emma. You know, you might like to think of something like this. I loved this image. I will show it in more full and talk about it. But, you know, how long do animals live? And we can, it is off Pinterest, and a whale, it's telling us here, relative to all the other animals, is to about 69 years. An elephant's about 59 years. Let's come down a bit. Look what we have here, top right corner, it's an eel. Now they're on this how long do animals live data graphic. It says they live about, well, 8 or 9 years. Now, that information I've Googled from other sources, Centennial Park, suggests they're more like 40 years. So I would double check all your information. But you could potentially then say, well, I'm going to give my time measure as an eel life. And maybe one of you, I mean, I just said before, you know, your pages, different timescales and audience, maybe one of your page is an ecological page. And you lay the whole thing out as this is the ecological approach. And maybe the lifespan of an eel is your time measure. If you did that way, maybe a second page might be the human approach. And this is where Astrid was talking and summed it up very nicely in the end. You know, maybe there's, you sort of work it at 2 systems. Maybe the third system is about rainwater detention and blue roofs or something particular. So this, I'm being a little open on how you differentiate your 3 PDF pages of plans and sections, but they must have different timescales and audiences. So it's not that I don't care who they're to, but I care that they're to different audiences, times and scales. You may haven't, maybe they're all different audiences. Maybe what are those 3 examples? So maybe one audience is eels. Maybe one audience is all humans. Maybe one audience is the rain. Gosh. So all of them, you might choose different scales and different things to show. I'd be kind of cool to do a page all on eels with their little feet crawling over some of those odd edges and things. We know from Astrid's talk edges are just so important. So you'd have quite a different approach. And I guess I'm being silly. You'd never be presenting to an eel, but maybe you'd be presenting to the eel society. So presenting to humans that are, you know, at the foreground of their mind are eels. I had a Pittwater Council, is that who it is? I'll show it when I end this talk. But I had a pamphlet called Dear Neighbour, and it was called Canopy Keepers, and it was all about the powerful owls. And I showed it in class yesterday. So, you know, for a kind of eel watch group or something. So 3 different pages, 2 different time scales and audience. You can choose. 3 times 1 3D illustrative images of each time period, not using AI. 2 of them not using AI and 1 using AI. We spoke into this with Ben yesterday. You don't need to get that AI image correct. What you need to do is have a go at using it. Get it wrong. Talk about how you prefer it to look different. But I want you to have a practice of using it. And I'm I'm going to bring that in a little more for assignment 3. So in this stage, I just want to know you've attempted it. One social media mock-up implying one performance outcome. I just took some photographs for you of second year work. So here's some examples from second year's last term. I thought I had people's names on it. That's naughty to not have it. Sorry, it was a lovely second year student. But here we have her page about social media communications. As master students, I expect you all to do this better. So this was an implication of a Instagram page using some of her drawings. This one was a presentation on social media. It wasn't pinpointed to anything particular. Maybe it could go on the council website, but it was celebrating Christensen Park and this idea of it being new and a spatial delight with a sense of this new proposal. This one was a social media communication technique. Images of group planting days, images of kids being involved. It says promoted through Instagram. It's by Tess from memory. Tess in second year. Just to give you an idea. Oops, last one. What's this one? This was another social media page. It looks like it was proposing an Instagram account and potentially some kind of different posts that one might put on there about details. This one has and again, it's an Insta site combining with the nursery in DigiGrow. There's a site, a mapping of the site, and a call to action. Why isn't this part of Christensen Park being mowed, do you ask? So it's highlighting an issue about mowing practices. Eastern Suburbs Banksia Scrub. How can you use social media to amplify, put a spotlight on things you're thinking? I'll come back to that. So, one page of material exploration, including 1.5 resolution scale drawing. I was just there on that. So Astrid talked through some of these material choices, and I've just transcribed her lecture. I will put that up on Moodle this afternoon. It's so excellent. There's so many good design tools to use. This idea of nodes, this idea of activating spaces, this idea of the promenade with punctuations of things that happen. And we talked about materials at the end, and we talked about recycled plastic. And I did remember a couple of years from another studio, there was quite some use, and these are some photographs of mine, and we were talking about fibre reinforced plastic grating. It's what I've seen getting used around various beaches with local councils. This is up in the northern beaches, and so it's called, It's called FRP, fibre reinforced plastic grating. So it comes in colours. And I've said there on my Insta post, I could use recycled plastic and oyster shells, could it use banknotes to source interesting recycled colour plastic possibilities. Like, think about what the possibilities of this is. You could have a sunbaking deck. This was at a Clovelly Beach studio. It was more about sunbaking. I always quite like this image. This is down at Clovelly, but no, it's not. It's up at a Narrabeen Beach. But this blur of a material transition, soft sand to hard grill. One can imagine that with the tidal change and sediment forming, how this sort of material could sort of note change on the site. So explore around. I'm just going to go to those notes I just took of Astrid's while we're all here together. Astrid, we talked about recycled plastic materials. She talked about marine plywood, gabions, stone, concrete, thoughtful use of it. I brought the idea of anything adaptable or movable to sort of changing times. Astrid talked about pontoon structures. The easy ones are 44-gallon drums strapped under something. Very, very light steel structures. Let's put a highlight on there if I can, because I didn't before. No, I can't now. Boring. Blue roofs. And Astrid's conversation about blue roofs. Where are we? 2 drawings, 1 to 10 of current council use detailing elaboration. So what I'm expecting you to do is to have a thought about something you might like to be designing, redesigning. Toilet blocks, bins, lighting fixtures, footpath edges. Look, get it, have a current detail of how the council's currently doing it. Because that's something you can then, into assignment 3, you can be developing how you might propose something that's different, that's much more site responsive and to your design. And one, explorative messy model. By that I mean, I don't mean a big site plan model. I mean you might be exploring how recycled plastic wears with sand, or how water surges kind of come up and hit slippery slides in children's playgrounds, or how the growth of a plant up tennis court fences, or what tennis court fences can also be. So in some ways a bit of a material messy model, or you might be a messy model that's exploring something like sea level rise. It might be made out of plasticine, and you tip it in and out of the bath, or a bottle that you fill up with water from the bottom. I just want you to explore, maybe you're exploring stormwater, work into this three-dimensionalness of show a design process through a messy model. Maybe it is the whole site model, but it doesn't need to be very polished. It might be very quick and on recycled cardboard, or cut up cornflakes packets, and you know, showing some key moves. Maybe it's made out of sand and a series of photographs. Explorative, messy model. It may be something you decide to make a better version of in assignment 3, but at this stage, just a messy design development model. Your presentations, you'll have 2 3-minute presentations to different audiences and a 2-minute other audience. Does that make sense? So 2 of them will have 3 minutes, so a bit more focus on them, and the other one will have 1 minute less. But you'll be presenting these 3 panels and talking to them like different audiences. So myself and Andrew, and we'll have a student panel going and mixing in and out, and we will all be different audiences for you. You can tell us what audiences we are. Maybe that's a fun thing. And as I said, you can decide if A or A1 is most appropriate for your site. So think through who you're showing it to. Maybe AO, and you want to pin it up in between 2 big trees on your site, and you want to leave it there for a week or 3 days, and it needs to be waterproof. Or maybe it's A1 and it just needs to pump out onto a digital screen on a state office, or a fold out at the end of a summary document. I want you to really start to give thought as to how you would convey information to whoever your chosen audience or audiences or neighbourhood is. If it's the baseball group, maybe it's on a baseball bat. Oh, that would be cool. Maybe it's something that can be pinned to the gate of the new tennis court, etc. So I think, have some fun with that. You can decide. So just explore about that. You'll be in class, so it's an AO or A1 size, but it will be digital. Certainly for week 8. Should we have this conversation? Maybe Andrew and I should be having this conversation as well. Do we want you to print any of this out for A2? It's a good question I'm asking myself. You must be asking it too. I have asked for 3 PDF pages, so we should keep it at that. But I would be tempted to have some of it printed out. Maybe we talk about that next week. So let's talk a little bit about week 6, the interim mock presentation in class. I expect you to have gaps. So you'll have your three pages, so to speak, of plans, and you might only have 20% of one page completed. You might have 10% on another page completed. You might have 50% on another page completed. And so fill in for us what you're hoping to work on in the next 2 weeks. As tutor and panel feedback, we'll be giving you a rubric and also, feedback on what else we think you could be showing. what kind of plan? Emma asked, what kind of plan? And it's really about stage plan. So it's far more about contingency planning and phasing than it is about a set master plan. Do I need to go over anything else here? Actively develop your presentation skills. So you may you may have some tricks up your sleeve for next week that you want to expand on. Looking at SEPTED, so absolutely go over Astrid's excellent discussion yesterday. Some of those key issues about nodes and districts and the promenade, activating spaces, consistent promenade, creating place. There's very, very good terminology in the SEPTED lecture by Astrid, and I'm expecting you to use it, and I will have it within the rubric. So this will firm up over the next 3 weeks, way before your presentation, the March presentation. I will do another lecture at the end of this week, and it will go into the Mary Miss and the Marty Franch a little bit more. It will go into time a bit more and this contingency planning. But I think I'm covering most things there. I mean, this thinking of Alison Page's of seeing the waterway as a pathway of knowledge, I think is very consistent with Astrid's promenade, which is trying to be consistent with how we're treating class, that you're all working with the sites adjacent to you. Emma thought her site was only Tunbridge Park, and within a discussion, very quickly she became aware that her site really included all the stormwater piping that feeds into her park, that feed that tidal water in, and their tentacles out up Ramsgate Road, down Florence Road. So you will find your catchment becomes your site. The key parts for how water moves, you'll find you've got feed-in streets that become very key. You may find you have feed-in pedestrian paths or crossovers that help you make those east-west decisions across the site. Certainly in class yesterday, we were talking about that with students. Look to the amenities that are existing. Have you got a toilet block on your site? That's the beginning of an activation point that already has amenity. It's already been paid for. It's already got plumbing. You begin, start there. How do you link that to get people there? How do you get bikes there, etc.? That's probably all I'm going to say for now. I hope this helps most people. That's it for now. Bye.